to the February 16th, 2018 Roundtable. We are live on Facebook, and we're just getting started. So I'm going to talk as little as possible because I really want to hand it over to our amazing guest speakers. So just to do a few kind of housekeeping things first. My name is Leanne Reagan. I'm the founder and facilitator of the Roundtable, and so delighted that you're here. Thank you so much for coming. And to anyone who's online. Couple of quick things. I've had a couple sketchy, so if anyone has ideas about, I want to be as welcoming and as inclusive as possible, but if you have experience with that, if you have any ideas, please let me know. I think we've got, about 150 people now in our Facebook group, somewhere around there. We've also had a request from a Roundtable member who has moved to Congo, who wants to start another Roundtable. And he wanted me to sort of type out a bunch of stuff, which I don't really have time to do that. But I wondered if it would be interesting if people submitted questions about how we run the Roundtable, and then we could do a Facebook Live. Someone could interview me, and then we could have that up in our portal. Any thoughts on that? Okay.
I mean, if you did it like that, then that would mean that anyone globally who wanted to start one would have, could look at those questions about kind of how to start one, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I'll maybe put a post up if you have questions, if you're interested in how the roundtables run. You can just send me some questions. If you want to interview me, if you want to do a Facebook Live, we could do it before or after a roundtable. So I'm talking like 15 minutes or something, like really, really short. Just let me know. That would be great. We're almost got the videos sorted out from past meetings. Facebook doesn't make it easy to find these darn videos once we Facebook Live them. So what we're doing is downloading them, uploading them to YouTube, and then we'll do some linking to YouTube. So it'll be much, much easier to find them. If you're able to, without it being a hardship, know that those badges that you're wearing cost 300 shillings. So if you're able to donate a minimum of 300 shillings for the badge, that would be great. The suggested donation is 1,000. And you might say, Leanne, your math is off. Why are you asking for 1,000 when they only cost 300? And that's because we collect donations, anything that doesn't go towards paying for the badges, we donate once a year to an organization that this group decides. So we just did it in January and donated to Brizan's group in Turkana, so working with pastoralist kids. So if you're able to donate anywhere from 300 on up, that would be great. If it affects your ability to participate, then please don't worry about it. So I'll just pass this around. My phone number is on there. If it's easier to M-Pesa, feel free to do that. And I was actually thinking about you, Anita. I found this, if anyone's heard of a zine, these pieces of art are done by this woman, and you pay I think they're $2 each. And she'll send you them, and then you fold them, and they turn into and they turn into these little books. So I bought one of each. This one is your word of the year. This one is on dreaming big. So yeah, she has I think 4 different ones. This is on being creative and such, and it's pretty simple. You just pay through PayPal or whatever, and then she sends you a little file. I just thought it was really fun. I make these little foldable books, but I hadn't thought of putting art on it. So she's got to work on her marketing, because I just thought of adding this. I'm like, okay, I'm going to find her website. So I just went to her emails. There's no website. There's no name of her company. So, but her name is Shami Dixon, and she does YouTube videos on arts and making DIY stuff. So I'm sure you could find her on YouTube, Shami Dixon, and $2, for a cool piece of art. And she also sends you a little video on how you fold it. So, okay. My website after many months is almost ready to go. And then it will be much easier to sign up for this roundtable because now it's all sort of done by hand. So know that that's happening. The resource library, super uber important. These books, which is normally where the resource library lives, is not the resource library. These are resources of our lovely guest speakers. The items that are in this area here are available for your borrowing if you like. We do have a number of things out that we're still waiting for return. So if you know any of these people, if you can nudge them. Some things have been out since September, and I've sent emails and reminders and So yeah. So. Oh yes. Hi. Yes.
So I actually found, so someone who came here for the roundtable last year, who is the person who introduced me to the roundtable,
okay.
actually borrowed them, so I can arrange to get them to you.
Yes. Oh my goodness, so many people have been asking about. Okay. Oh, that's the best thing to happen today. Okay, great. So the Unlearn cards, if you haven't seen them, are the most popular resource in the resource library, and they're big, colorful cards about issues of multiculturalism and race and sexism. They're just amazing. They're just these really big, beautiful cards to use for discussion. Anytime I use them in my workshops, people always love them. And they're really expensive. So I'm very glad that's great. Okay, thank you. Okay, so I just want to turn it over to you just very briefly, if we can go around, because I think part of the really wonderful thing about being here is that there's such great people in the room. So if you can just start with saying your name and a role that you play. It can be a professional role or something personal. It's up to you. Jack, can I ask you to start?
Sure. Jack Chisholm. I was working formerly with the International Organization for Migration, and now I'm doing some consulting work.
Great.
Good morning. My name is Samantha. I work as a leadership coach at Vicarious.
Oh,
Take the time.
Yeah. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Leah Anyanwu. I'm also at Dignitas as their Program and Evaluation Director.
Welcome.
My name is Carol Blakeway. I'm just a visitor here, and Susanna is our daughter. And we also have spent many years in Africa, in our young days.
Oh, welcome.
My name is Joe Blakeway. I'm the husband of my wife. And we are visiting our daughter. 35 years overseas experience in various countries, and so we love Kenya.
Also, I'm a daughter. My parents always like learning. They never stop, no matter where they are. They're so curious. So I've become an intercultural trainer, and I'm also now being trained as a repatriation coach, and also train youth and teenagers who are transitioning to another country. My name is Yukabet. Sorry. My name is Susan. Ready? My name is Yukabet, and I'm with Metis. We run a fellowship for education system. My name is Julie, and I'm the psychotherapist for couples and individuals in love.
My name is Tibu Asata. I'm a lecturer at the Department of Industrial Eastern Africa, and I'm also doing consultancy private practice.
My name is Benta Ndavika. I'm still a student of psychology, and I'm also a part of an organization called Kilimanjaro Initiative.
I'm Jennifer Gray, and I'm a life coach.
Welcome. Okay, and welcome to the folks online. We've got a couple people. I think Kathy, people are kind of going off and on, so I think Kathy's there and a couple others, so welcome. And now I want to throw it over to our guest speakers and have them introduce themselves. And as you may or may not recall, if this is your first time, our tradition in introducing people is that they give us some words that have little stories behind them, and you get to choose the word that they introduce themselves with. So because there's 3 of them, I think we'll just do one word per person. So Ilya's words are adoptive mother, sea care, resilience, Stephen King, extroverted introvert, and fierce visionary. So what's the one that really pops for you? Stephen King. Okay, Ilya.
Stephen King. Okay. My name is Ilya Yasevich. Thanks for having us. I am American. I've lived in Kenya about 6 years, and I actually now reside on the coast in Diani and come up to Nairobi as needed. But that's the ocean is my base in many ways. But Stephen King, so I grew up in the theater with acting, live theater, some TV stuff. And when I was little, I got the opportunity to be in one of the Stephen King's movies, Children of the Corn. If anybody has seen that. Otherwise, go home tonight and watch it. But it was extremely exciting as a kid to be in that movie, and which felt like we were making a Disney movie or something, until we were invited to the premiere with all these little kids who were watching this R-rated, and it was like absolutely terrifying, which we didn't feel as we were making it. But so that's my connection, my link with Stephen King.
That's
so thank you.
And by the way, Kathy says hi, Kathy Vaughn, on live, and Hannah is around, and so is one other person. I'm sorry, Benta Megan Pretty. Sorry, I probably butchered that. So welcome to those folks, and Anita. So Anita's words are fidget, wonder, hospital food, J-bond, tree, and office supplies. So which jumps out at you? Hospital supplies? Okay. Oh, hospital food, sorry. Hospital food. Okay. Hospital food.
Hospital food. I love hospital food.
I love these things. I know these guys. I don't know these things.
Even airplane food, I get really excited about it, and I have a very even here you can notice my buffet logistics. I always go and look at everything first, and then choose. But I realized I love hospital food because it meant I was spending time with my father, who was a doctor who worked a lot, and so when we went to go visit him, we got to go to the cafeteria, and not only did we get to go to the cafeteria, we didn't have to pay. I thought it was the best thing ever. So I have so anytime I see a buffet, I mean nowadays I of course have to pay, but yeah, hospital food holds a special place in my heart and stomach.
Nice. Welcome, Anita. And Sarah's words are passionate, free thinker, nature lover, ocean, and yoga. What jumps out at you? Yoga. Okay, yoga.
So I'm Sarah, and I'm from South Africa, and I've been in Kenya for about 5 months now. And yoga for me has become one of my de-stressing processes and recentering processes, and I guess it's only been over the last 2 years that I really became introduced to it. And this was because my dad was very much involved in yoga, and at first I was like, what are you doing? Like, this is so different to what I was brought up with. But then once I started doing it, I really felt connected to the process of yoga and really what it ignites within me. So
nice. Welcome. Okay, well, I am tickled. I think we've been working on getting these guys here for like a year or something. It's been a long time. So we're so lucky to have them, and I'll turn it over to you guys.
And can you turn the adapter over to us too? And get started.
So we're just changing over the PowerPoint here. And Meg McNulty says hello. She's online with us.
Meg?
And unfortunately, her kid is sick, so
here. My name is Anita Shankar. I'm so excited to talk about hospital food. I didn't talk too much about myself, but I'm a senior director with the Global Trauma Project and thrilled to be here with our colleagues because we have been working on this for quite a while. And I'm so thankful for all of you who came in the room. I know a few of you from different parts of my life, and it's wonderful to be here together. And today we're going to be talking about learning, leadership, and trauma-informed practice. We have 3 members of our team here, but we represent a much greater team. These are some of our pictures of the people that we work with. Our ongoing project right now is in South Sudan. We're going to talk about a little bit more about that, but more importantly, we're going to talk about what is trauma and what is compounded stress and what are the impacts on both learning and leadership, and how can we all do things to be trauma-informed and why that is important. But first, we're going to have a little fun, because even in our trainings, we like to have fun. We like to get people active and engaged and moving. So to begin with, I want to play a game called Taboo. Has anyone played Taboo before? It's an American board game. Has anyone? Jen, I'm looking at you. Have you played Taboo? Mm-hmm. Many years ago, exactly. Do you feel comfortable just describing what it is? You don't. That's okay. Anyone else?
It's the game. Pick a word and act it out.
Close.
Everyone has to guess.
You're so close. Yes. It's a game where you have a word and people have to guess, but rather than acting it out,
you say words, but you can't say the word.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yes. Good. Okay. So what you try to do is get the other person to guess a word, but you cannot use 5 words that are commonly associated with that. So to demonstrate, Sarah, who has never played Taboo before, is a newbie, okay? So it's, I should have put it up, but, so I'm going to try to get her to guess. You probably can't see that, but we'll explain what it is. So Sarah?
Can you show us the...
Oh, yes. Oh, yeah, and you guys can play online as well. Okay, so, yeah, gosh, it's much harder once you have to do it. Okay, so this is something that's up in the sky. It has heat. It is bright. It...
Oh, do I need to
You need to guess, yes,
right.
yes.
So...
I like it. So does Ilya.
Stars.
No.
Sun.
Yes.
Yay.
Good. Okay. So you can see the top word said sun, and the words that I could not use were warm, yellow, light, solar, and planet. So I tried to describe this, get her to name sun, but I didn't use these words. Okay. So what I'd like us to do is break into groups, and we can have would you like a German-speaking group, Susan? No? Let's get into groups of 3 to 4 people, and we can play in teams. And they could even play online if somehow we could figure that out. So, how should we? Yes, but let's. How would you like to break into groups? Usually we have this all organized, but with this conference tables, it's a bit hard. Pardon?
Maybe 3.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So are you 3?
And maybe 4.
Yep.
So here's 4 for your group. Don't look at them, just take 1 card each.
Hi, Robert. I can see you're online. Welcome. Welcome, welcome.
Oh, Ilya, it's easier if just have
1 card each, but don't show it to any other people. Okay, and you guys also just take 1 card each. Don't let others.
Do you have one that I can play with the people online? Okay.
Oh, she can join.
Should I go in?
Yes, go there.
Make it balanced.
Yeah. I have. Good. So that's your tablet card.
Hi, Erica. Welcome. Do you guys want to try to play with the, does one of you want to try to play with people online?
Can you play with people online?
Okay, so this is different.
So maybe just to repeat the instructions. Maybe we could give them another example.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right. I'll use this one.
Okay.
I don't know how to describe this.
So for the folks online watching, we've got 3 people online right now. So Sarah's going to try to get you to type a word into the comments section. If you want to show us that one as an example.
Yeah. So I don't know, is this, oh, it's a bit lagging.
Okay, so she will try to, so as using this as an example, do you want to stay? You're welcome to stay if you want. So she would have tried to get you to say the word crown, but she can't use any of these words. So she couldn't, as hints, she couldn't use the word head, gold, king, queen, or jewel. So if you have any questions, just type in the comments section. Otherwise, she's going to get you to try to type the word in the comment section. So we hope that those of you online, there's 4 of you now.
You can be one group.
Yeah. So if you think you know what she's trying to get you to say, type it into the comment section. Okay.
Okay. I'm going to choose an easy one.
Okay.
So you use it to protect yourself in weather that could make you wet. Lots of people in London use it. This is so much harder than what I thought it was. Do we have any suggestions?
We've got a bit of a delay here.
Oh, is it? Okay.
Okay. Oh, so Hannah has said umbrella.
Yes, well done. That's it.
Hey, Hannah!
I'm so glad you got it.
Hannah got it. Woohoo!
Shall I do another one?
Yeah, sure.
Great. Okay. Oh, this one's great. So it's an international drink. It's made from beans, and people drink it to get going. Do I have any suggestions?
Maybe just repeat it again.
Okay. So it's
Hannah's saying coffee.
Oh, well done. Coffee's Hannah's on a roll.
And Hannah has a migraine. Oh, and Kathy said coffee too. Way to go. Yeah. Way to go, Hannah.
Coffee will help.
Hannah has a migraine, so the fact she was supposed to be here, but she's got a migraine. So the fact that she's even getting this.
That's probably why she.
And Meg had guessed Shield. Good guess, Meg. Good guess. Yep. I love these women with migraines and sick kids, and Kathy, I'm sure you've got lots going on your plate too.
Should I do another one?
Sure. What's your time like?
Do people need more time, or are people finished? Yep. Okay. Let's come back to the large.
Great. Well, thanks for playing.
Large group.
You guys, I'm so impressed with you online that you're playing. This is great, and you got it.
I get to use my lovely bell, which also has significance and meaning. Great. So, welcome back. We also have 2 people who have just joined us. Do you want to just briefly introduce yourselves?
I'm super excited to be here. My name is Erica Zachary, and I am a mediator and consultant. I'm also a professor of public policy at Northeast Normal University in Dongbei-Shila, which is Northeast Normal University in China. So I'm really happy to be here and to be warm. Because I'm really usually very cold. So yes, good to see everyone in person and not just on Facebook.
And may I say that Erica is easily able to jump into things. I have known her for one day. I'm like, do you want to go to this Irish ball? And she's like, yeah.
Yeah, let's go.
So,
yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, and the lovely...
Hi guys, I'm Vicarious. I'm internal vegetarianist. I was assisting here in issuing the badges.
So Velma really saved our butts today because getting these there has to be someone at the gate who hands out those tags, and it has to be someone with a UN pass, and I didn't have anyone today. So can we just give a round of applause to her? This was just so great. And I encouraged her to join. So welcome, welcome, welcome. We're so happy you're here. Welcome.
Yes, thank you. So let's bring it back to taboo. How was that? Playing. Susanna, give it 2 thumbs up. Jen, you said it's fun? Yeah. Anyone else? Julie, fun? What was fun about it?
You have to really think about how to describe this without using the words.
So it's difficult for you. Did anyone else find it difficult?
Yeah, I did.
Do you want to say, Evelyn, you were doing it online, which was amazing. So what was difficult about it for you?
So the words I would use naturally, I couldn't use.
Yeah.
So then to have to think of like other ways of describing it was challenging.
Good. Any other comments about the game, please?
Yeah, like for me, she was Hawaii was slow, and she was saying, "I'm trying to run away from something. I'm thinking."
Lion? Yes.
Yeah. So I think Ilya would get it very well.
Okay.
Slow, but for me, I'm thinking in Kenya, running away from home.
Yes, good. So it's dependent on context, right?
Yeah.
Great. Okay.
And Meg online says it felt humiliating.
Oh, do you feel comfortable telling us more, Meg?
There's a bit of a lag,
okay.
So I'll let you know if she puts in a comment.
Because that was not our intention, but thank you for that, and I'd love to hear more about why you felt it was humiliating. Oh, Jen.
I like the fact that we're able to laugh at ourselves.
You kind of have to, right? Even though I was thinking, oh, this is such an easy game, and when I came up here and was trying to do it with Sarah, I froze, a bit under the slight stress. But so what made it difficult, right? We couldn't use the words we would naturally use to describe these common situations. So it's much easier to describe things when we have a common language, when we have a common understanding of what concepts are and how they affect us and how they play out in our lives. And the reason I chose this game, which is a common board game, it's really popular years ago. Go ahead.
So Meg says, I missed some of the words, so a good lesson on how to try and get the full picture.
Oh, thank you. Appreciate that. And what we do at Global Trauma Project is we try to give people language to describe their experiences about trauma and compounded stress, but also about the impacts it's having on themselves, their families, their communities, and even organizations and systems. So we played the quick game of taboo to just, as a segue of why it's important to have a common language to describe things. We're very excited about telling you a little bit about our work, our background, and being trauma-informed. Do you want to take over and say a little bit more about GTP?
All right, hello again. Again, my name is Ilya. I'm Executive Director at Global Trauma Project. And like Anita said, one of the things that we do is to try and kind of help people to have this kind of common language and way of talking about our experiences, how things affect us, how we're trying to cope up, with different things that we might be going through or stressors that we, have been facing in our lives or things like this. And also how to thrive. I mean, how to find our own light and capacity for leadership. Especially when there can be different things that impact that, right? Because if you think, for your own self for a moment, and like, I think our belief is that we all kind of have this light inside of us, right? We all have certain strengths and gifts and talents that we can bring out into the world, where we can inspire others and encourage others and create some kind of positive change even, within our families or our communities or whatever. But sometimes there's things that can block that inside of us. There's things that can weigh that down and build up, that kind of cover up our light, right? And cover up our capacity to lead and to shine, right? So one of the things that we do is kind of, help to support people in figuring out what are some of those things that might be covering up your own light and your own, capacities, and how to work with some of that stuff so that it can kind of, the dark, heavy stuff can kind of, come off, and you can become kind of stronger and brighter and more brilliant and have a greater, more positive impact. Does that make sense? And so, one of the things that's important in that is, how can I even know what is going on inside myself, how things are affecting me, and how can I talk with other people about it? How can I connect with others about it? And what can we do about it, right? So we'll talk a little bit about some of the strategies and things that we use. But today the topic is really about learning and about leadership, right? About our own development. And so we're going to talk a little bit today about how things like ongoing stress and even different types of traumatic kinds of experiences can actually affect our brain, our capacity to learn, and our actions and our ability to take different forms of leadership in our lives. Okay? So please feel free to ask any questions, stop at any time. We're going to do a few different little activities throughout the session today. And before we leave, the last thing we're going to do is to give you guys some time to think about the concepts that we're talking about and think about how are these concepts related to my own life personally or to my own to my work, and how can they be helpful, or maybe what are some things that I feel like I need to kind of go from here. Okay? So briefly, we'll talk more about this in a moment, but one of the kind of strategies that we use at GTP to help us to explore these things is this kind of core framework that we use as a foundation for our work. And for short, we call it TICE, but that stands for Trauma-Informed Community Empowerment. And what that means is that we believe that that most people are affected at different times by different types of stress or challenges, difficulties, traumatic things. These things affect actually most of us as human beings at different points in our life. And so in fact, let me ask you guys, when you hear the word trauma-informed, does anybody have any idea about how you would define that? What does that mean? If something were to be trauma-informed, any ideas what that would mean? Does that mean we sit around and we talk about trauma, like our most horrible stuff that we've been through? What could that mean if something is trauma-informed?
I would see it as having an understanding of what are the impacts of trauma and what can make people traumatized.
Yeah. Good. So
creating an awareness.
Yeah, so creating an awareness, having a good understanding of what are these things and how do they affect us, right? Fantastic. That's exactly a huge part of it. Yeah?
I think about it as a lens, just like gender or race or age, like a lens to look at how am I doing this work? What do I need to keep in mind, to think about in terms of how trauma has impacted or influenced or, it's like a lens to look through.
Yeah, good. So it's like the when we're, like you said, when we're looking through this lens, there's things that we're keeping in mind, right? Things that we're keeping in our awareness and our understanding. So it can help inform how we're doing things, right? So like you said, some of those things that we're keeping in mind is, how does trauma or how does ongoing stress affect people? How does it affect me? How might it be affecting any of you? And even our capacity to talk or even to focus here this morning, right? Did anybody have any kind of significant stress this morning that you even experienced? Anita did? Yes. Can you briefly, just, you don't have to go into it in detail, but just briefly something about it?
The situation?
The
or
stress,
how it felt?
yeah. Like what was causing you major stress and how did it affect you?
We've had water problems for over a week, and I said, all I need is a hot, clean shower this morning. And I turn on the faucet, and it's brown gunk. You can see Jen's face. And of course...
Keep that face, Jen. Keep that face.
Yeah, and I came here. I just wanted a quick shower. You know, in South Sudan, we expect certain situations. Here, I'm home, and I just wanted a quick shower. So I felt very stressful, and I ended up boiling drinking water for a quick rinse through. So it was just one of those things of like, of all days, come on, all I need is either clean water or hot. Yeah, sorry.
So there was something, stressful. Right? This lack of clean or warm water, yes. Right? And the fact that you're going and you're presenting, you're standing up in front of everyone, you're giving a talk, and all you want to do is you want to feel clean. Yeah. And this was causing some major stress for you this morning. Yes. And did you notice, Anita, did it affect how you feel physically? Did it affect your thoughts or your emotions in any way?
All of the above. And then recognizing of okay, I can handle this. I'll just deal with attempt to do.
Okay. So there's a stressor, and then it's affecting her, which we're not going too much into detail, but affecting her in a lot of different ways, right? How she's feeling, the thoughts she's having, physically how she's doing. And then you said something important that then, okay, there's some ways that I tried to cope up with it, right? And again, we won't go into all of those right now, but these things are important because somehow still you didn't just totally crash, right? She was close. She was on the edge. But somehow she coped with it. You got in your car, you made it here through the traffic, through whatever else, and got here. So this thing about being trauma-informed, or stress-informed, we could even say, is about having some understanding of how do these things affect us. How could that maybe even affect our ability to get here on time, to feel prepared, to feel calm and focused, right? To be able to connect with other people, because it can affect us in a whole bunch of different ways. And then if we think about community empowerment, I mean, probably a lot of us in our own personal lives, we want to feel empowered, right? We want to feel capable and good within ourselves, I have a purpose, I have some capacity to, make some kind of good influence within my family or within my work setting or community in some way. And also a lot of us here, I think, also work with other people, right? We are doing different types of development projects or, things that are supporting others. Maybe not everyone, but I think a lot of us are. And so also we're looking at, how can these things affect our capacity even to provide support and encouragement to other people, right? So we're going to go in to this framework briefly today because what we believe is that if we have some kind of core concepts that we can use as a foundation, then we can kind of have a good way of thinking about and understanding what are the things that we're trying to kind of bring in to our lives and to our work. Yeah? So we'll say more about these. But briefly, Anita's going to come back and share some of their thoughts.
So briefly, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the process and the development of the trauma-informed community empowerment framework and the curriculum. Ilya and I actually met at a training where for 2 days we sat on a blue chair, like this one. For 2 full days, we were just sitting there and listening to someone basically read a script, right? Which is not my preferred way of training. For one, there are usually amazing people in the room at trainings. So fortunately, we got to talking afterwards, and that's how we met. There are better ways to do trainings. And at the time, she had already developed this amazing trauma-informed community empowerment framework. My background is facilitation and curriculum development, and we teamed up together to write a facilitator's manual that we use for most of our trainings. But what's important about being trauma-informed is it's not just the content. It's not just about the trauma itself. It's all about the process. So what's the application? How are we being trauma-informed even in teaching? So for us, it means we're not sitting in chairs, for 2 days or 3 weeks like we do our larger trainings. We do a lot of things which we'll do a lot of we do a lot of activities which we'll demonstrate later to help to be trauma-informed in the process of teaching about being trauma-informed. And our main project right now is in South Sudan, where I'm used to things like dirty water and high stress. It was the context of today that kind of threw me off and made my stress level go really high. But we're currently putting on the South Sudan Trauma Healing Initiative. It's funded by the United Nations Development Program, and we were so fortunate to get our curriculum certified by the Ministry of Education. So people who go through our trainings get a real certificate of achievement, which is a really big deal for us and for them. And the focus, or not necessarily focus, the core of our training is self-care. The core of everything we do is self-care. If we don't take care of ourselves, we can't take care of other people. If we're not dealing with our own stressors, we can't shine bright, like Ilya said. It impacts us, and sometimes it impacts us so slowly we don't recognize, right? There were some other things this morning which were also stressful. So for me, it was a lot of little things that all of a sudden I got to this almost very close to breaking point and realized, you know what? It's okay. We'll just let it go and figure out how to do it best. So in all of our work, we focus on self-care first. A little bit about the initiative. It's under the Rule of Law Project because UNDP, United Nations Development Program, realized people can't function fully if they don't work on themselves first, if they don't have access to trauma healing and an opportunity for self-care. And what's so funny is a lot of people come into the program with a professional hat on of, I am the prison warden or I'm a teacher and I've come to learn about trauma. And we say, welcome. And within the first few days, they say, I had come to learn about trauma. I didn't realize that I had trauma. Which to us is I very much appreciate that reflection and awareness for them. So the current model right now is we're building the capacity of 300 local providers in 4 different states throughout South Sudan. And about half of those are government affiliated and half are civil society. Our current model is a 3-week training where the first week we focus a lot on self-care and the introduction to trauma and compounded stress, which we'll talk a little bit about today. The second week, we spend a lot of time going into those core components of the trauma-informed community empowerment framework. And then the last week, we prepare them to go out and give community workshops. For 6 weeks after the training, we have a GTP staff person who mentors small teams of 3 to 4 people who do weekly community workshops in their various communities. I thought I had a different, this is a picture of some of our trainings. There it was. And this is some of our pictures of the workshops in the community. And we're really fortunate to have a robust monitoring and evaluation strategy, and Sarah will talk a little bit more about that afterwards. Do you want to use this, or do you want to use the flip chart? I can start with it. Okay.
So what I'd like to do now, if it's okay, is we're going to do kind of like 2 parts, okay? We're going to do the first part that we're going to talk about and explore a little bit. It's some of like what do we mean by compounded stress? What do we mean by trauma? Does it relate to any of you here in your own lives? And how does it affect us? And how might it even be affecting you in your own life right now that you may or may not be even aware of? So that will be the first part, if that's okay, so that we all kind of get on the same page as on some of the things that we're talking about. Then the second part that we'll go through are those core components of the TICE framework, and spend a little bit of time kind of exploring how those components might be relevant, again, to your own lives and to the work that you're doing, and to learning and leadership. Is that okay? Okay. So, can you guys all see this okay? I realize that the screen is actually quite small. Even I have a hard time seeing it from here. So probably from there it's even more difficult. But,
can I just jump in? There will be an edited version of this PowerPoint in the resource portal, so you will have access to the PowerPoint.
You can maybe, yeah. Usually, when we do this and this type of kind of thing in most places, we usually use, we don't have technology, so we usually use flip charts. We actually have like really huge flip charts, which we didn't bring here today. But so Sarah will also put the flip chart up so that you can have maybe a closer look at some of the things. So the first thing that I just want to talk a little bit about is this idea about compounded stress. Yeah? And can anybody just describe briefly what you see happening with this person up here? Anybody just describe what do you think is happening to her? Yes?
Also, there's a woman, I think.
Yeah, a woman, yeah.
Carrying heavy sticks on the back. And the load, and she's getting more and more.
Yeah.
Sticks as she's collecting them. And then she somehow trips, or it's too heavy, and then she just collapses.
Yes.
That's what I see.
Yes. Great. Okay, that was a great description. So I want you guys to think for a moment, if you will, about, because we all have sticks that we carry, right? This is like a load that starts to add some weight, to us. It's like there's things that are heavy, right? When you just have one stick, usually, we can do okay. We just have one stick. It's okay. I can carry it, right? But as we keep getting more and more sticks added on, at some point, for every single person, at some point it will be too many sticks. And what will happen when you have too many sticks? You collapse, right? It's just too much, right? Can everybody carry the same amount of sticks? No. What are some of the things that might make it different, that might affect how many sticks you can carry? What are some of the things that could affect us? Our internal coping, right? So like, am I able to cope with certain stressors or whatever? Yeah? Good? Previous experiences, right? Support network.
Your upbringing or what you've seen your role models be able to handle.
Yeah, so what I've even seen or learned about how to carry this load, right?
How many sticks I'm already carrying.
How many sticks I'm already carrying. Education. Really good.
My, Meg says the size of the sticks.
The size of the sticks, yep. Some might be just little twigs. Some might be huge logs, right?
How much economic freedom I have to have other people carry sticks for me.
Yes. If I can hire other people to carry the sticks, it lessens my burden,
yeah.
right?
Motivation.
motivated I am, right? How much like energy I feel like I have. Yeah?
Systemic things, class, race, gender, sexual orientation, things like that.
Yes. Yeah.
Your age.
Your age, right? Age, gender, health, right?
Physical ability.
Physical ability. Huh? Your mentality, right? Looking around this room, who do you guys think in this room could carry the most heaviest sticks?
Interesting question.
You.
Me? Come on, I'm small. I don't know.
Well, the capacity of getting rid of the sticks, that is a deciding factor for me. I mean, loading on more sticks, somehow you collapse. But if you have enough, you say, hey, why do I need all this? Get rid of it. And that is why I think it's a great capacity of getting rid of the sticks.
Okay. So if there are people here that can more easily kind of know how to get rid of the sticks and let certain ones go and take them off, right? Rather than some of us who might just keep loading them up and carrying more and more, right? Okay, so I'm gonna ask you just to think to yourself for a moment. Think about your own self, your own life, and what are some of the sticks, either like big or small, what are some of the sticks that you feel like you're carrying right now? What are some of the things in your own life that you feel are kind of like adding some of that weight or pressure or stress? They might not all be negative. There could be things that are positive, but they still are a load. Yeah? Take a moment just to think for yourself. Okay? Just take a minute. And then I'll ask you, if you, again, just for a moment, if you'll just really briefly turn to someone next to you. You don't have to share all of these things, okay? But see if there's just one or two that you feel comfortable that you could share with somebody who's just sitting next to you. Just, one or two that you feel comfortable sharing about what are a couple of those sticks that you might be carrying, okay? So I'll leave it to you, just because we're just taking 1 or 2 minutes. Just find someone next to you and see if you could just briefly share a couple. And for people online, if you're comfortable typing in 1 or 2, a couple of your own sticks or stressors, we are here on this side, and we would love to hear some of your sharing as well. So Leanne will see if anybody's typing anything in.
I guess mine would be
there was an issue there, and then I was like,
There's someone like.
Yeah, so Hannah has said migraine and bad Wi-Fi.
Oh yes, yes. Yeah, definitely. Okay, 30 seconds. Okay. Is there anybody that didn't have any? You got with your partner and you were like, I don't have any stick at all that I'm carrying.
Teach us.
Huh?
We're still going.
You're still going, I know. Anita and I are like, we're used to having 3 weeks to talk about this. So, yeah, I mean, I think, you know, again, I mean, this stuff is, I mean, it's stuff that we all can relate to because it's things that are a part of being human, right? Most of us, we all have, you know, different types of stress and, you know, things that we're dealing with. And we go through different periods of our life where sometimes the stress is totally builds up. There's a whole bunch of things happening all at once. And then there's periods where, you know, it might be much less, you know, so, okay. But I think we got the point about this, right?
I have a quick follow-up question. How did it feel to talk about your stress? Did that relieve the stress, or did that give you anxiety to talk about your sticks?
Anybody? Just
pardon? Okay.
So at least you shared it a little bit briefly. Yeah? It brings some awareness to it, right? Sometimes we try to block things out, and then when we start to think about it, it can activate the stress even. So that's one side of it, why sometimes we don't even want to think about it or talk about it. But then on the other side, when we think about it or talk about it, you know, we then can sometimes more easily come up with different ways of actually how to actually handle it, right? Or things that we can do with it, as opposed to just holding on to it and carrying it all. So just briefly, I just want to mention some things also about some of the heavier sticks that can happen, because these are sticks that now can kind of become more traumatic for us. Yeah. And just to say that as I mentioned these things briefly, that again, not everyone, but there may be quite a lot of us that have experienced different types of traumatic things even in our own lives. I mean, usually it's very many people that also have these types of experiences. So just to say, as we're talking about some of this in the next hour, you know, just try to be aware for yourself of how you're feeling. You know, if it raises any kind of thoughts or feelings or memories at all for you, and if it does, just know, okay, that's normal, that's okay, and we can talk about anything even after the talk, and yeah, and we'll also talk about some coping things, okay? So I don't have these on here, so I'm going to hold this up, and Sarah has it also in the back, whatever one's closest for you to look at. But one type, there's all different types of things that could be traumatic, okay? So just to briefly say, one is something that we call like a single incident trauma, okay? This is something which is like really a big event. It's a big, very difficult event, and it affects us in a way to where it kind of pushes us over the edge. It's like, the woman here that has had one stick too many that's been added, and she's now collapsed. It's really that stick has kind of pushed her over the edge, right? She's been trying to cope, and now it's too much. Yeah? So when it's too much, that's when something now becomes traumatic. Yeah? Because it affects us now even more deeply. It's overwhelmed our ability to cope, right? So sometimes there's a big event, some kind of situation that happens that affects our ability to cope, and it's too much. And so this means that it can start to affect us in a lot of different ways, which we'll talk about in a minute. It can start to affect us physically, mentally, emotionally. It can affect our relationships, our daily activities, like my ability to work. It can affect us spiritually, right? So I mean, can anybody give just like a very brief one example of something that could be like a single incident trauma? Yeah?
I lived from New Orleans and the hurricanes. So Hurricane Katrina, for a lot of the community I worked with, was that single incident trauma.
Absolutely. That's a great example. And if you mention, Katrina, I mean, especially there, of course, I mean, everyone they'll know what you're talking about. They'll know that was something that was traumatic. I was affected in whatever way, right? Usually the single incident traumas, like we can pretty clearly identify what they are. Yeah? So that's an example. Here in Kenya here in Kenya, has there been any kind of large single incident trauma that has affected even a lot of people that you can think of? Yeah, so some years ago, right? That was a big single incident. Mm-hmm.
I think just very recently after the elections, all the killings that were going on.
Yeah, the community violence, right, or like the post-election violence especially, again, some years ago, but that was a huge incident, right? Or actually multiple incidents, but that affected many people. So that's one thing. Another type of trauma that we can go through is it's more difficult to identify. And this is something that we call developmental or complex trauma. It's going to be hard to see this because this is so small. Can you get one and just pass one around? But I'll describe what's happening here. Here, there's a little boy witnessing, he's sitting before like three graves here. And there's a woman who's coming and yelling at him. Yeah? So maybe in this picture, I don't know, we could think, maybe it's his parents that have died or, someone very close to him. Maybe this woman is a neighbor or a relative or someone that is coming and for whatever reason is being very harsh with him and yelling at him. In this picture, we have that the same lady is now chasing him away with a stick. Maybe she might be beating him or something. And eventually, we have the same little boy who is ending up on the street. He's now kind of like one of these street boys. He's there next to the trash. There's some bottles of glue even, and that the boys are using. So we, I think also, unfortunately, for many people, there's a lot of these different types of experiences so for example, I work with a lot of people that have a lot of developmental or complex trauma. And, sometimes we do these questionnaires and things like, for post-traumatic stress or whatever, and they will say they'll ask people to think about the bad thing that happened and then answer these questions, right? And for a lot of the people that I work with, if we ask that, many people will say, Ilya, what are you talking about? What do you mean this bad thing that happened? I don't know what that is. Do you mean my whole life? Is that what you're talking about? Because there's been so many things that have happened. There's not like there's one. And also it's just normal, Ilya. What do you mean? It's just my life, right? There's nothing like no big thing. It's just normal life, right? So for this boy, for example, this is just normal life. This is what he's growing with. If you ask him to think about what the traumatic thing that happened, he doesn't know what that is, right? And yet there's been so many ongoing things that have been hurtful or painful that have gotten him to the point where it's too much, right? And it makes it difficult for him to cope in a good way, right? So sometimes this is called developmental trauma because depending on when things happen during the course of our development, it can affect us differently, right? If my parent dies, if my mother dies, it's painful. But if I lose my mother when I'm 2 years old, It's going to affect me very differently than if I lose my mother when I'm 50 years old. Yeah, would we agree with that? It will be different. It will affect me differently. We also call this complex trauma because, you know, these experiences can be a bit complicated, and also they can affect us in very complicated kind of ways. It's not like there's to mention a couple others. Sometimes traumatic experiences can be collective of people, or Katrina, a lot of people. These things affected many, many people, not just one, right? Sometimes these experiences can be individual. It can just happen just to me, right? Maybe I leave here and there's a horrible thing that happens to me on the way back after this meeting, right? Hopefully not. But I might just have an individual experience, right? And those things can affect us differently.
Can I just ask you,
yeah,
in your personal, I guess, and objective point of view, what's the difference between stress and trauma?
So, the difference will be in the level to which where it affects us. So stress is normal, right? I mean, it's a normal part of life. We all, like I said, we all have these sticks. We all have some level of stress. But when it like collapse or the being really overwhelmed by it, and now it starts really affecting my life and my coping, now even the stress can start to even become traumatic. It can affect me in the same kind of way that a traumatic experience could affect me. So the other thing is that there's a difference between experiencing a traumatic event and actually like becoming traumatized, yeah? Because sometimes we might experience a traumatic event. This was horrible, right? I lived through the post-election violence, and it was horrible, and it touched so many, you know, of my relatives or friends or family and whatever. But maybe my life was going resources, good support, good coping, and after I was able to cope up with that, you know, experience pretty well, and I wasn't so horribly affected by it. So I experienced a traumatic event, but I didn't become traumatized by it, right? For other people, there might not even be a traumatic event, but it might be even this buildup of many multiple ongoing stressors that at some point can actually affect me to the point to where it's like I'm even traumatized, you know, because of how it's affecting me. Does that make sense? So, I mean, the main thing is that, I mean, these things are normal. And, you know, there's again, we can have different points in our life. You know, some of us have been traumatized and have reached our breaking point, or our level of coping, you know, has gotten overwhelmed. It's happened to me. And then other times, you know, we kind of come back and we're doing quite okay, and we can cope with things, you know, quite well. The other, I guess the other one that I'll mention here also is this thing about vicarious or secondary trauma. In this picture, we have a priest who's sitting there, and all the people are coming to him, talking to him about all of their problems, yeah? And at some point, this can start to really deeply affect him, right? If he's not managing all of these sticks that are being brought to him very well, he also can get to the point, again, of where it's too much, and he starts to be really affected, right? So especially for anybody here who is dealing with a lot of stress, is working in humanitarian sector, and, you know, working with people who are going through a lot of complicated issues or stress or whatever, I mean, we have to take really, really very good care of ourselves, because we'll get to this point. I mean, this is the secondary trauma, where even if it doesn't happen to me directly, it can start really affecting me because of everything that I'm hearing and seeing and having to somehow deal with and support. Does it make sense? And this part in kind of defining these is because, you know, sometimes when people are like, okay, trauma, what is that exactly, right? And really understanding the difference between a traumatic event versus becoming traumatized, right? And getting to that point. And even how normal stress can also build up and have kind of a similar effect. Yeah? Okay.
Just go
up this way here.
Pardon?
Use the story.
We're locked, okay. So, if you can see here, I think because of time, gosh, the time is so fast. We're not going to do a whole exercise on this, right now. But I just want you to think for yourself with those different stressors that you maybe talked about or were thinking about. There's a lot of different ways that they can affect us, right? So if we start at the top, they can start to affect us physically, our physical bodies, in different ways. Headaches, stomach ache, back pain. They can start to affect us emotionally, where maybe we're feeling, very sad or anxious a lot of the time. Maybe I feel irritable and angry, Gosh, Leanne, why isn't this set up on time? Jeez Louise. Okay, she didn't do anything, but because of my buildup of stress, I'm already, right, having these kind of emotional reactions, right? Mental, it can affect our thoughts. Right here, there's about this guy is having dreams or nightmares. Even at night, the brain isn't stopping, right? Maybe you're sitting here, but your mind is actually someplace else. You keep thinking about that problem that you're having, and you're not really even able to be here right now, right? It can affect our thoughts in different ways. Spiritually, right? We can start to even question God, lose our faith, totally depend on our faith as the only thing. It can affect our behaviors. We might start, using drugs or alcohol or substances. Maybe, we have, not had any sexual life for, with our husband or wife for the last 10 years because that's affecting me, in what I do and how I feel. It can affect our relationships. Trust other people. Yeah? So we could explore these much more, but I just want to, I'll ask you again just to think, or maybe if you're taking notes, you can even jot down in your book for a moment. Are there any of these things that you are feeling for yourself, right now in your life? Do you notice anything happening for you, with your thinking, with your relationships, emotionally, or things in your body, physically? Yeah, you don't have to share it, but just think for yourself, okay? So I'm going to talk about the brain, and then we're going to... So, so what happens, and this really ties to the learning piece, right? Is that we all have a brain, and our brains are pretty much all designed more or less like, the same way. And there's this back part of our brain. It's actually one of the earliest parts of our brain to develop, and we call it the survival brain. Okay, this is the part of our brain that when there's a threat, when there's a danger, I was worried there was a threat. If the door opened and a lion came into this room right now, what would happen to us? Anita would freak out, right? People would jump up. People would run. You would dive under the table. We would try to escape through, right? This is our survival brain being activated. And the survival brain, it activates our survival responses. Anybody know what the survival responses are? Yes. Fight, Fight, flight, freeze, and there's another one which is it's newer in the research, which is a collapse. It's like so we're hardwired for these responses, okay? And when our survival brain gets activated, these are the things that just naturally happen to us, right? Because our brain is designed to make us survive, no matter what, at all costs, right? There's another part of our brain, which is this part up here, which is the prefrontal cortex. But to make it easy, we call it the thinking brain. Yeah? Because the thinking brain is in charge of what? Anybody know? What does it do? Prefrontal cortex. Anybody that's studied this? Psychology people? Yeah? Thinking, cognition. Impulse control, right? Like so yeah, things like problem solving, right? Thinking through things. Wait, what am I going to do about this water situation? Who do I need to call? When are they coming out, right? Making the schedule, right? Rational thought, planning, future planning for the future things. Okay, all this stuff happens in our thinking brain, right? So an interesting thing that happens is that when our survival brain gets activated, it activates our stress hormones, things like adrenaline and cortisol, right, start pumping through our body, and it does something to our thinking brain. Anybody know what happens? When this part takes over, it does something to our thinking brain. It switches it off. Yeah? It shuts down the thinking brain. Why? Survival. Why would it need to shut down? Exactly. You need to run out, not sit there and think about it, right? Thinking takes time, right? So, I mean, again, this is how we're set up. The limbic system, it also even affects something else, which has to do with even memory processing, right? So even how we remember things later on gets affected because we need our thinking brain in order to process things, in order to process our experiences, yeah? So if our thinking brain is not working well, we don't process those experiences in the same kind of way, right? They'll be left more as like sensations. You know, maybe we'll remember the smell of something, but not all the details or the timeline as to what really happened, right? I might feel like it was terrifying, but I can't remember all of those details because it wasn't processed right, yeah? So that makes sense in terms of danger, in terms of the lion coming in and trying to attack us, right? But the thing that happens is that our survival brain can get activated even when there's not an actual danger or threat, yeah? This can be that there's something else that triggers our survival brain, yeah? For whatever reason, yeah? So if I experienced Katrina and those heavy winds and the rains or the color of the sky at a certain point, even 10 years later, when the wind starts coming or there's that smell in the air or the sky turns that little bit weird color, it might trigger my survival brain. And I am feeling totally anxious, I'm irritable, I don't feel comfortable, I can't really, attend to things well, and I don't even know why, right? So again, this is something very common that happens to most of us, and I want to ask you to think for yourself again for a moment. Is there anything that ever triggers your survival brain? And the other thing I want to mention about the survival brain is that this, like the fight response, It doesn't have to be huge. It doesn't mean that like I start going and like physically attacking Sarah, and that's my fight response. It might mean that my fight response is, dang it, Leanne, why aren't you ready with the technology? You're wasting our time. This is a part of my fight response, right? It doesn't just mean that I go and hit someone, right? So if you think about, the fight can look different, flight can look different. It doesn't mean that I automatically run from this room, but I might be sitting here and just, I'm mentally escaping, right? I shut down being present or connected as a way of kind of escaping or my flight response, right? So just think for yourself, is there anything that tends to trigger your, this kind of response for you? Yeah?
And how does this information link then to learning and leadership? Have there ever been instances that either yours or other people's learning and leadership perhaps have been influenced by this?
Because to learn, you're taking in new information, right? You're processing that information, you're using it. What do you need, brain-wise, what do you need in order to learn well? Which part of the brain? I mean, you need your brain, but you need to be able to have this thinking brain going well, right? Which means if you're in any state where the thinking brain starts to kind of shut down, and there's a lot of maybe stress or things that might be triggering more of the limbic system, you're not going to be able to learn as well.
Can I share a quick example? And it's actually the flip side of learning. In my 20s, I used to work a lot with teenagers in many different settings in schools and jails and foster homes and after school stuff. And one time I was working with the teenagers in a high school, and there was some issue about what they had written down. And I told them they could write anything, but then someone had written a comment and then wasn't claiming that they had written the comment. And I tried to create safety in the group. It doesn't matter what you write. You can do anything. So I'm trying to facilitate this, and no one was claiming responsibility for what they wrote on the wall. And I was like, who wrote this? It doesn't matter who wrote this, but you need to tell me who wrote this. And one of the girls looked at me and said, ooh, she's getting mad. I had been triggered, right? And I stopped and I recognized, oh my goodness, yes, I was getting really mad. My thinking brain was not working. I was in the survival brain, but I didn't recognize it. It took someone else to recognize that I was being triggered. So once again, it's knowing these concepts, it's knowing the words, so we can describe the experiences and think of what are the other options and then act accordingly.
So which part of survival was linked with that?
Pardon?
Which part of your survival fight or flight response was actually linked with that?
Fight. I mean, I was angry. I was calm on the outside, but I was angry that someone had written something and then not taking responsibility.
But isn't the fight or flight response usually when you sense some danger in some form?
So what sometimes happens is that if it's associated to a particular event or self-belief, your adrenal glands have been heightened. So you perceive it as a threat, but it's not actually a threat. Does that make sense?
So everything which is related to anger, frustration, etc., is you're saying related to?
Not necessarily, but in this instance, yes.
Or maybe the authority was in question, so she felt questioned and attacked.
Okay.
It's not denial.
This is what and we can talk more in depth about this, later as well. But it's not; these aren't always like the big clear things, right? Like where it's clearly there was a danger or there was a clear threat, right? But like she's bringing up, it may be that there was this kind of subtle feeling of being threatened because it's threatening my sense of authority, my sense of professionalism, that I know what I'm talking about.
that you guys are disrespecting me, and that, and it's touching, it's triggering something in me. Maybe I felt disrespected before, maybe I felt that, as a kid, whatever it is, but for some reason that is triggering, more of this stress response in me. The stress hormones, are being activated, and therefore I can't respond to it with my whole thinking brain, really well. Instead, I'm going into this, who wrote it? Who wrote it? I'm going to spend the next half an hour asking who wrote it, right? Rather than being able to do anything else, right? Does this make sense? Yeah?
And, Scary, can I jump in too? It relates so much to parenting. If any of you have teenagers, this brain development also relates to parenting and how both toddlers and teenagers and young adults' brains work, and what part they're using or not using.
So the last thing I'm going to talk about right now, okay, and then we're not going to get to everything, okay? So I'm going to talk about one last thing, and then Sarah's going to mention a few things about impact of using these kinds of things in our work. And then Anita's going to do one final activity with you guys, applying this to your own personal and professional lives, okay? So the last thing that I want to talk about is about this thing about regulation, okay? So to help us think about this, I'm going to use this thing, which is a thermometer, yeah? And thermometer is usually used to measure what? Body temperature, right? When we're too hot, too high, or too low, okay? In this case, we're going to use the thermometer to talk about the level of our energy and our emotions, okay? So when I'm at green level, somehow here in the middle, like my energy is somehow kind of at a good level, right? I'm awake enough, I'm alert enough to be here and be focused and pay attention. And, I'm not, but I'm also calm enough, again, to be able to be here, right? I'm not falling asleep, I'm not, ready to run out of the room, yeah? And also, I could be having any kind of emotion, even anger, yeah, even sadness, whatever. I could have any kind of emotion, but I'm in control of my emotions. I can manage it, right? My coping skills are not overwhelmed. Like I can manage myself. I'm in control of myself. Because my thinking brain, when I'm here in this level, my thinking brain is still on and working, right? But sometimes, like we said, we get triggered, whatever it is. Sometimes there's things that push us up too high, up into the red level. The orange level, then the red level, right? And when I get to the red level, my thinking brain shuts down. My survival brain starts taking over, right? I'm not in control of my emotions so much. So now instead of saying, oh, Leanne, we're not ready yet. Okay, is there some things we can do to get the computer set up, right? Instead of doing that, because that's when I'm in green level, if I'm in red level, what will I do? I might shout at her, what? I'm not coming to this L&D thing again. It's totally unprofessional. This is so ridiculous, right? I might, whatever it is, but I'm clearly in red level, right? I might become aggressive. I might leave. I might, The same thing can happen when I start going down and I get too low, and now I go down into blue level. Now's where it's the same thing. My thinking brain goes off. My coping is not, working well enough, right? And now I might start getting, my energy is too low. I feel totally exhausted. I can't focus. I just want to sleep. I don't want to leave my house. I'm totally unmotivated. I don't care anymore about my work. I don't even want to talk. Yeah? I might start getting really hopeless, feeling helpless. Yeah? When I start going really down, too low, right? So one of the things that, and again, this happens to all of us. Again, this is a part of being human. There's times where we all go up into red level, no matter how great and wonderful we think we are. And there's times where we all go down into blue level, right? For some people, it happens a lot. For some people, you might go through something where you're all the time, it's like I feel like I'm in red level, right? For some people, they don't go there very much, right? Their green is pretty like, they're usually here in the green. And we look at those people and we're like, wow, they're really cool. How do they manage all of this? Their coping is like really great, right? So I want to give you just a moment, to think about when is the most recent time or example that you would have where you remember yourself either going up into red level or down into blue level. Okay? So I want you to think about the example of the most recent time, and then I want you to think, because you're all here and you're all doing pretty well right now, right? So then I want you to think of what helped you to get back into green. Because from seeing you all here, I think you did something, otherwise you wouldn't probably have made it here today, right? So think of your example. What was it? What did you look like when you were in red or blue? How were you feeling? How did you behave? Might be kind of embarrassing, but we're not having judgment about it, okay? Because this happens to all of us. And then what did you do to help yourself get back into green? Okay? So can you all take just like 2 minutes? Think about that for a moment. If you want, you can even, just write it down on your paper or note card that you have, just to give yourself the example, okay? And then if you would like, you can turn to a partner for a moment and you can share any aspect of that you feel comfortable sharing, okay? You don't have to share details, whatever you feel comfortable. But just take a couple minutes briefly, think about it, and then you can just share whatever bit of it you feel comfortable, okay? I'll give you just like 3 minutes, so okay? And for people joining us online, if you want also, you can take a minute and just, write down your example with some notes. And if there's any part of it that you feel comfortable typing in and sharing in the notes online, that would be great. That would be a nice way of kind of like sharing a bit. Okay? Thanks. Okay, 30 more seconds. I know it's really short. Okay. Any, like, one person briefly, is there anyone that would just briefly want to say anything about what you noticed, just, thinking about this and your own thermometer and anything that you're kind of learning or thinking about as you're going through that? No.
What we realized was what can help with regulation is information.
Okay, good. So having more information about things that you could do, or
it reduces the sense of panic or uncertainty. You get more information, it helps with regulation.
Great, wonderful. So for example, regulation is one of the core concepts that we talk about and that we practice on, right? So like you're saying, part of regulation is having that awareness and then being able to do something about it, right? Have skills and strategies and everything. So you're saying, wow, one of the things that actually can help is having information and knowing what can I do. That's something that can help, right? If we have more time, we could really explore a lot. What are all the different things that we could do and practice together or individually that can help to re-regulate ourselves, right? And support each other in regulation as well, yeah? So just to mention, I said, like, that's one of the core components that we talk about and explore in trauma-informed practice. Another one is about safety, because safety and a feeling of security is one of the things that really gets affected and threatened when there's too much stress or trauma, right? So we have to look at how to create and enhance safety and a sense of security, yeah? Regulation, I mentioned. Connection, our relationships with other people is another thing that can get hugely affected. My ability to trust other people, my interactions, the way I communicate. These are all things also that can get affected and broken down. So what are things that we can do to kind of strengthen and enhance those relationships and the sense of trust and the interaction, yeah? Another one is about identity. Identity is about my sense of myself, how I view myself. Am I competent? Am I capable? Am I a horrible person? Am I stupid? Right? How do I view myself? Where do I fit? Where do I belong? Who am I a part of? Right? These are all some of the things that can get affected. And the other thing we talk about and explore is about empowerment. Right? Again, do I actually feel and have the skills and abilities to shine my light and to create positive impact and to do positive things, right? How can that also get stifled or pushed down or affected? So these are some of kind of the core things that we look at in this framework of trying to enhance and strengthen trauma-informed practice in really anything that we do. So this stuff can really be brought into, our own personal lives as an individual, as a partner, as a spouse, as a parent. It can get brought into our professional work, right? Whether I'm a teacher or an aid worker or a IT person. Still, these things, again, because we're all human beings doing this work, whatever it is that we're doing, it can affect our professional environments as well. And even on a systems level, right? We're here at the UN, We're UN funded, right? We could even explore how systems, like the UN for example, or any system, can also operate in a trauma-informed manner or not, right? And how can we strengthen that? So Sarah's going to mention just two things briefly. Okay.
Yep. So just briefly, one of the things that we've been doing is monitoring and evaluation and research, and we have two forms of research. One is questionnaires and the other one is heart rate variability. And so from our research, what we've really found is a really encouraging response in that, as you can see the graph, is that our PTSD symptoms, emotional dysregulation, and the critical heart stress is all decreased from our training. So with the PTSD symptoms in the USA, the gold standard for trauma or stress programs, the PTSD symptoms need to decrease by 15%. What we found with our TICE training is that it's decreased by 64%, which is a huge percentage. In the USA, the gold standard, so what programs need to reach is there needs to be a decrease of PTSD symptoms,
which is post-traumatic stress.
Right.
That's
so that needs to be 15%.
15.
Yeah. So what we found with our TICE program is that it's 64%. So that's a huge, huge difference.
In South Sudan.
In South Sudan. And that's with one of our cohorts, which is in Juba. And another really important thing that we found is that there's been emotional dysregulation, which is when, what we were speaking about is that when people can acknowledge what they're feeling and then be able to work to counter that. So what we found was that there's been a heightened awareness in people acknowledging what they felt and being aware of what they were feeling at the time, which affects your relationships. There's no, as you were saying, there's no confusion. You know where that emotion is coming from. So what we've really found from, as you can see from the results, is that TICE program has really helped our cohorts to be able to regulate their emotions, to be able to decrease their PTSD symptoms, and for their physiological responses to have regulated. So that was speaking about like the survival brain and then the thinking brain. Sorry, this is having to be very, very quick.
Yep.
So,
and I'm actually going to cut you off.
Okay. Yes, sure.
That assessment taking into culturally sensitive.
Yeah.
Think about the absence of certain languages.
Right. So that was one of our problems, and that was really, really interesting. And maybe we can chat afterwards because we don't have much time.
So
left.
I'm feeling a little anxious, and I'm getting up here because we have so much more we want to talk about. But we recognize that we're out of time and we don't want to run over. But one of my favorite wrap-up activities is the concept of the head, the heart, and the feet. And so I'd like to briefly do this with you. Can you reflect, what is something that you've learned about being trauma-informed in this presentation from one of the resources in parts of the discussion? What's one fact or knowledge part that you learned? Was this new information? Did you know it before? I see some nods. New information?
Yeah, for me, I think just getting to learn and understand that once you experience like a threat, there is the survival brain triggered, and then it actually makes your thinking brain to shut down. So it's actually helped me think about the people I support, like the teachers I support, and even me myself, just becoming aware of that.
Thank you. What about the heart? Can anyone describe any feelings that they experienced during our 2 hours together?
right on time, perfect timing, because I'm dealing with a couple students that are in crisis and going through that process. So it's always good reminder as, I guess, a caregiver to be careful of the secondary trauma and all those things. So it's just always good to get these reinforced, because sometimes you're in the field doing work and you forget.
Absolutely. And you mentioned individuals and communities, but more and more we're focusing on the systems as well. You know, how can the systems be trauma informed so that the individuals and communities can then also be trauma informed? And what about the feet or the hands? What are you going to do with this information? Use it. Can you just very briefly say how?
I really like, so I work, the students I work with culturally, anxiety is sort of built in culturally, particularly around grades and how they have to perform. And so we're constantly doing the struggle of having them understand that they need to acquire skills and not just worry about getting an A. And so I think that I will definitely use your temperature exercise again to help them identify how they're feeling anxiety around finals and in the classroom. I think I have to do more because I'm not just a classroom professor, but I'm also an advisor for the major, so I have children having meltdowns in my office all the time, so I think I'll use it for both.
Thank you. Thank you for your energy, your enthusiasm, your patience. Thank you all the people online as well. We are happy to talk with you further. We've got lots more information, lots more resources, and we'd love to talk about possible collaborations as well. So thank you very much.
Great.
Thank you,
Robin. And Mia, I think you have a few words.
Yes. So, as a facilitator, we like different claps, and as a former kindergarten teacher, so if we could do one for Ilya, Sarah, and Anita, if we stick with the hurricane theme. The rain starts like this, and we just tap our hands. Then it grows to 2, to 3, to 4, and it's a full story. Thank you guys for that. I think the knowledge and expertise you guys brought today will help us, whether personally or in the clients and the partners that we work with, and really to just improve our practice. So thank you for coming with your wealth of actual physical resources and sharing your just experiences, your expertise, and tips for us to take back. And so we'd like to just give you each thank you card from all of us. So thank you. Anita, Ilya,
thank you,
and Sarah. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Jack, can you just make sure that's true? And Lucy says thank you online, and Hannah says thank you, ladies. Great inspiration. So just to formally wrap up and know that you're welcome to stay and collaborate and chat and network. In terms of resources, at the bottom of your agenda that I sent you, there's a lot of resources. We have 5+ years of meetings online. All the resources are there. There's a bunch of different databases. There's a contact list, lots and lots of things there. Is there, just really quickly, are there any community announcements? Are there any events coming up that you want to share? Anything happening in your community that you want to talk about? Any funders with $1 million to give away with a 1-page application form? Okay, just a final reminder for donations if you haven't had a chance to and you've been meaning to. The envelope is here. Thank you to those who donated. The lending library, we've got a couple of things here today. Please don't walk out without letting me know that you are wanting to borrow something. I'll just get your name. If this is your first meeting, we alternate guest speakers with a more sort of informal networking session. So next month is our networking, and we're going to be talking about meeting the modern learner. So I'll give a very, very short talk, and then people will break up into small groups to talk about that topic. In April, we've got Fiona from the Canadian High Commission, whose job includes basically an underground railway, getting people out of situations in high stress, high danger, high conflict scenarios. So she's going to give us some scenarios to work with and how do you make decisions in those kinds of settings. We don't have anything scheduled from June on, so if you have ideas for topics or if you have suggestions for guest speakers, please let me know. And thank you, Santi Sana. And if your weekend is about to start, please enjoy. Thank you so much for coming. Thank you to everybody online, and hope to see you all online or in person next month. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.